Que lo que mi gente, it's your girl Jay. Today I wanted to talk to you about, as we decolonize spirituality and what that might look like. I wanted to talk about Catholicism and yesterday being Ash Wednesday and religious trauma that we might have around that. And so it's been on my mind because as we decolonize what religion means, what spirituality means, there is like this portion that we need to heal around how we were colonized, right? As a child of both the colonizer and the colonized, especially in the Caribbean, there's a specific kind of like vibe that is connected to Catholicism, because Catholicism was used, especially in the Caribbean, to enslave our ancestors, right? And so when we see people talking about Ash Wednesday and Lent and what that might look like, it might be triggering for some of us. I know for me, I was raised in a Pentecostal evangelical type of household, and so we didn't celebrate Lent. And though it just brought up like ideas around why my father specifically, not my mom, because she was more of a bruja anyways, or is, but why my father has such a negative connotation with Catholicism that I have continued. Like, that's something that I have realized that I also have, because he felt like Catholicism wasn't a real religion. And looking back and understanding that, I think I understand why he felt that way, because especially like folk Catholicism and Caribbean, especially around the Caribbean, how Caribbean Catholicism is, it can look like brujeria. And when you come from a border town like I did in Dominican Republic, there is a lot of that. You're exposed to a lot of brujeria. And so for him, Catholicism was brujeria. And working with saints, which is basically what the word santero means, right? Is working with saints being Catholic. He felt like, well, ergo, Catholicism is brujeria. And so he refused to step foot, like even in a Catholic church. And so when my husband and I decided to get married, he grew up Catholic. His family, he comes from a family of spiritualists too. And we discussed the possibility of getting married in a Catholic church. And my husband, we had to not, right? We had to second guess that idea, because my dad was like, I refuse to step foot into that church. It's almost like he felt like as if he stepped foot into the church, it would make him immediately go to hell just from that step alone, right? So, these are things that I have been thinking. And even like with Lent, like I said, even though I didn't grow up with Lent or with Catholicism, I started going into a deep dive, because from an outsider looking in, like Lent seemed to be, giving something up. It seemed very like manipulative and very, ridden in guilt. And I feel like a lot of Catholicism is ridden in guilt. And so it's almost like, well, Jesus gave up his life for you. You can't give something up for 40 days. It sounds like really manipulative to me. Or even, saying, well, God, his only son, God gave his only son and sacrificed that, and you can't sacrifice something you enjoy for 40 days. That's tough, right? To like see it in that way, especially as a child of an immigrant. Some of us, our parents had this, when they migrated to the US, our families thought of like what a perfect world would be like for us. And when we decided that our perfect life was something else than what they had in mind, it's like, how could you, right? How, after all I've done for you. And so that triggers me too. And I don't know if that triggers anyone else to be like, oh my God, after all you've done for me, I'm choosing my own path, and I'm being, manipulated or guilted in a way to not do what I wanted to do with my life, because you had this idea of what my life should look like. And so the whole thing around Lent seemed really manipulative. But, you know, I started going into a deep dive because that's what I do, right? And so I started looking into the meaning of Lent, and apparently Lent is short for Lenten. And so in the 40 days from Ash Wednesday, the days are getting longer. And the days have been, if you've noticed, the days have been getting longer already since the beginning of the year. As we get into the equinox, it's starting to get longer. You're starting to see that. And you know, the church does use astronomy and astrology to figure out where the moon is in relation to where the stars are in relation to where they were around the time that Jesus was killed, right? To figure out where Good Friday would be and where Easter would fall every year. They do that every year. And so when you think of it that way, that's why Easter is different, right? That's why Easter is not in the same time like Christmas. Easter is in a different day every year, because they use the moon and the stars to figure out the degrees of where they were, which, you know, is a sense of brujeria. And even like with 40, or as what they would call brujeria, right? Because that's an Afro-Indigenous practice of looking at the stars, navigating the sea. You know, our ancestors navigated the sea with the stars, and that's how they, you know, especially if you were like Taino, that's how they were able to like hang out, like I call it, from island to island, because they knew where the islands were, and they would just get in their canoas and they would travel the island, or travel the Caribbean Sea, basically. So thinking about all those things and how really Lent is a time where that falls during Pisces season, right? We just had that last video. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It falls during Pisces season, ends after the equinox. And so when you start thinking about, wow, the 12th house Pisces, letting go, what are things that we could let go in order to be better for this coming astrological new year, and thinking of it in that way. And so when I started thinking of that and really embracing the fact that, you know, my father believed that Catholicism was rooted in brujeria, and also believing in the fact that if it wasn't for our ancestors syncretizing, right, our Afro-Indigenous practices into Catholicism, we wouldn't be where we are today, and honoring that, right? And so honoring that part to say, okay, what is something that I can use to focus on to better myself into these next 40 days? What habits, and it's not even, doesn't even have to be negative, it's not something you have to give up, right? What habits can I break? Sure, but what new habit can I bring in to make me stronger, to make me better focused, to give me growth and spiritual growth and professional or personal growth, personal development, as we end this Pisces season and go into Aries season. And so when I looked at it like that, and I started peeling the layers back of Lent and Catholicism and religion, it is a way to heal our lineages, right? Because religion was used to enslave our ancestors. And so to look at it from a different point of view, to syncretize it in the way that they did, but in a modern way, to say, well, I'm going to use this for my benefit. This collective energy of Lent, right? These next 40 days of Lent and collective energy, I'm going to use that to my benefit, to whatever it is that you're thinking of doing, whether it's making something better, or whether it's making yourself better, like improving on something, or giving something up and seeing, because habits really take 21 days to form. And so thinking about what new habit can you bring in, or what old habit you can break. And so I wanted to share those thoughts with you. And then of course I'm just going to bring out the tarot just to see what Spirit has to say about us. I'm going to use El Tarot deck just to see what, you know, what could we focus on, what habits, right? So let's see, The only thing I don't like about this deck is that you know when they are reversed. So I try not to look at it when I'm shuffling. But what do we need to focus on? So I'm not gonna say let go or, you know, add on. What is our focus in these next 40 days through Lent? Taking us into the new astrological year, into Aries season. Oh, that's a mess. Hold on. What I do here? Okay. I am not the best shuffler. All right. Like looking away, I'm looking away. Okay. And then everything, of course. All right. We said we weren't going to let things go. And they were like, we are. This is, okay. I love this. So first we have the moon in reverse, right? Judgment in reverse. I love how it says la moon. They could have just wrote la luna, but. All right. Ocho de swords. This was in reverse. Ace of Swords in reverse, and the Hierophant in reverse, which I'm enjoying this because, you know, the Hierophant talks about traditions, and that's literally what we're talking about, and new traditions, right? In reverse, it's rebelling against what we thought was, you know, what was given to us as like the word. This is the word. And going through the illusions, and you know what, it's still Pisces season. This makes sense. Going through the illusions, understanding what's real, what's fake, what you're gonna pick up, because you don't have to have everything, right? Judgment, figuring out what's for you, what's not for you. What can I let go? You know, understanding that, like the bendas, right? The oh my God, the blindfolds have been taken off. And so now you can see clearly, and this is in the middle, right? This Eight of Swords in the middle to say, what makes sense for me? Because it's not going to be the same for everyone. And sometimes us with religious trauma, we have a hard time understanding that not everyone is on the same path, right? We might share similar ideas around spirituality and what that might look like, but our journeys are all still different. And so remembering that just because there's no one there, there's no pastor, there's no priest there telling you what you're supposed to be doing, what is expected of you, does not mean that you don't know or that you can't do this. That what you're doing might be different from someone else, but that doesn't mean that it's they're wrong or you're wrong. It just is, right? And understanding that it's okay to be a rebel and to be bold and to figure out your own path, especially when it comes to religion. You know, there's Catholic witches that work with saints, that's still working through their religious trauma, right? We all have different things that we're going through. And sometimes this moment of Lent can really bring that up to the forefront because it's not something we were thinking about before. It might be something that you're thinking about now, to take the time to understand, what is this, where is this coming from, and how can I work through this for spiritual growth and development. And so, you know, we're cutting through the noise, we're seeing the illusions, we're going through it, doesn't understand what doesn't make sense for us anymore. It might have made sense to you before. That doesn't mean that it will always make sense. As we grow and we evolve, we're going to have different ideas, different methodologies, and that is okay to bring in, as like a modern bruja, to bring in your spin of things, because like I always say, modern problems require modern solutions, and what worked before might not work now. And you know, your feelings might change around how you view spirituality, how you want to work your special magic. That might change. And so thinking of those things and how you can be better, right? Better yourself through these items, through Lent, through Pisces season, you know, working with all of that together to figure out what the best road is for you. Okay. And I always say, as a child of the colonizer and the colonized, like, we have to recognize the role that Catholicism has played. We can't shy away from what has happened. That's why it's important to know your history, important to know what happened, not just in your family, but where your country, where you come from. So that you can understand, like, how brujeria was used, why it was used that way, because brujeria is activism, it's freedom, you know, from enslavement. That's what our ancestors used it for, not to hex some girl that you don't like, you know. So that's important to mention. Woo, I love this. Okay. I'm using the Taino Oracle again. I've never seen this one before. 𝗿𝗵𝗲𝗃. Okay, the 𝗿𝗵𝗃𝗃 was the town like priest, right? And it says spiritual awakening guidance, and that's what the 𝗿𝗵𝗃𝗃 was. You know, they assisted people through spiritual awakenings, through you know, use of the 𝗀𝗶𝗿𝗃 and things like that. And so thinking about this time of Lent, that is you know, a time that our ancestors most likely also recognized to be a time of spiritual awakening, to ask our ancestors for their guidance, right? And then you have 𝗀𝗲𝗱𝗃𝗃, okay, clouded hidden outcomes, and it gives me the vibe of the moon. Okay, so it is very like going through this awakening to understand. And then this honestly gives me this card, right? Going through the spiritual awakening to understand what is, you know, what was hidden, whether it was in your family. How did your family hide their practices? You know, how did they, if you were Catholic, because you know, even as late as our grandparents, our parents, where you would ask them if, you know, if they were religious, they'd say they were Catholic, even if they were practicing, right? And so how did they practice in that way? How was their practice hidden? How you can bring that out into the light through your spiritual awakening? How can you use your ancestral folk Catholicism practice to continue guiding you into this time of Lent, into this time of the new year and beyond? Okay, so that's what I'm seeing for today. I hope you enjoyed this message. Let me know, are you Catholic? Or you did you grow up with religious trauma? Yeah, let me know. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Bendiciones para todo el mundo. Bye.